Have you ever felt like you're standing in a hallway, like in the hallway of your own life? That's that's the way that I'm thinking of it, and I'll describe it at this point, but let me kind of elaborate. So, like, have you ever felt like the door behind you has closed and you know you're not going back there to who you were, but the door in front of you, the next door, hasn't it hasn't quite opened yet. And in the meantime, you're just kind of standing there, just standing, like feeling restless, maybe questioning things, maybe questioning everything, and wondering if you're falling behind, but while you're also trying to figure out who the hell you are now. Does that feel familiar? That like in between kind of space. That's what some people called a threshold season. And I think a lot of women, I know I felt this way, but a lot of women in perimenopause, especially at that time of perimenopause and menopause, are living there. So a lot of you are living there like right now. And I would even challenge you to consider that you're living there whether you realize it or not. So what brings this all up for me? In addition to just, the conversations that I have with you all the time, the thinking that I do about my own experiences and in coaching so many women through this kind of threshold space. Recently, I read something that a friend of mine, actually a former mentor, now friend of mine, wrote. She grew, she was a teacher, you know, so I felt a connection there when I first met her. And then she grew an online business, a coaching company, to huge, phenomenal success. And she sold her company, oh gosh, a year or so ago, took some time off, and she found herself caught in this weird space between what was and, as she describes it, what was next. And she described it as this peaceful place, but also this unnerving space for her to occupy. Because when you've been busy your whole life, and you can probably relate to this too, when you've been busy working, moving towards something your whole life, doing, producing, striving, determined, setting and achieving goals, it feels really uncomfortable. It feels foreign not to have like the next everything mapped out, right? And as I read her words, she had posted on social media about this. And as I read her words, what struck me wasn't the peace that she described. It was what I will describe as the parallel, right? That's what struck me. And my friend who was writing this also coincidentally is moving into, she's in her 40s. And so she's moving into this perimenopausal space. And I'm recognizing that what she's writing about is not just about this period of unnerved, unknowing what's next, for example, in her business life and in her career, but in herself is what I'm seeing. And that's why I'm calling it this parallel. It's a parallel to what I see in the women who I coach. It's a parallel to the journey that I have been taking myself. And it's a journey to what you might be feeling right now, if you're honest. So listen to this with an open heart and an open mind. I remember when I stepped away from my college role as vice president after decades in education. And it was a decision that I made that felt really right, but that didn't mean that it was easy. It was anything but easy for me. I'd spent my entire adult life being the go-to, the achiever, the one with the answers, the leader, right? And when that role dropped away, then I didn't exactly know who I was outside of that identity for a while. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was standing in yet another threshold season. but I felt it. I felt this restlessness, this sense of disconnect from the old, right? But not yet being fully tethered to the new because I wasn't sure what the new was exactly. And that was, the beginning of the work that eventually led me here to coaching, to this voice, to this podcast, to this mission that I have. And it wasn't that shift, that walk through that threshold wasn't born from sitting still. It was born from sitting with myself long enough, but with myself in a different way, asking different questions, right? One of my clients, let me kind of explain a little bit further through a client story. One of my clients, I'm just going to call her M, okay? She came into my program saying, I just want to lose weight, like so many women do. But a few weeks into her coaching journey, it became very clear that what she was going through was more than just a physical transformation. And I'm going to give you the, M's story, but this happens all the time with women who I coach. M's kids were grown. Her job was feeling, she wasn't unhappy and just completely disconnected from it, but she described it as not being as satisfying, not as fulfilling as it had been. And she felt that while she's married and she felt that her marriage, she loves her husband. She felt that something just wasn't as connected there anymore. It was feeling flat. It wasn't as intimate. It was, she described it as many of my clients do. She described her marriage as, I feel like we're living more as roommates than we are as partners. And even though, as she told me, she was doing all the right things, air quotes, she still felt like she was kind of a shell of herself. And here's the thing about that, about M, about so many women who I coach, it would have been easy for her to let that feeling be a reason to check out on, in a lot of ways, check out, right? To say, well, maybe this is just what it feels like to be 54 or 55 or 56 in my case, whatever your case is, to let that fog that kind of settles over life at this stage to be an excuse for not showing up, not showing up for herself. But instead, M, like again, all of the women that I work with, instead of letting that unsettled feeling and all of those things I described, instead of letting that be an excuse, she leaned in. She got really, really curious and she asked a lot of questions of herself. And then part of that questioning led her to me for coaching to work on her physical and her emotional and mental and psychological. And through that process, she lost a lot of weight. She lost a ton of inches. And yes, her energy came back. She improved her health. But more importantly, she started remembering herself, but even more than that, reinventing herself for this next stage of life. And I think that's what this season is really about. It's not about doing nothing, it's about reflecting and doing things differently. So it's not a season where you just, rest as in you nap and you quit everything and you disconnect. But it's a season of rest, as in you step back from the noise of life and everything that is that noise in your life. You step back long enough to hear your own again. And so stop doing what really never worked long enough to find out what actually does. Because if I'm going to get really real with you, a lot of women stay stuck in this season way longer than they have to. And it's not because they're lazy, but a lot of it is because they're scared. It's because they've been misled by every diet, every program, every lie that they've been fed about being broken, about needing to find more willpower, about needing to try harder. And when that doesn't work, rest kind of starts to sound like relief. But that's not real rest. You see, that type of rest is actually resignation in disguise. And that's what keeps so many women broken and stuck. That's what keeps so many women from being able to step into this next half of life with the vigor and the activity and the happiness and the joy. And so I want to ask you something kind of reflective. When you think about where you are right now, do you feel like you're in between who you were and who you're becoming or who you want to be? Between maybe the way you used to care for yourself and the way you want to care for yourself now? Between, I don't know, living on autopilot and actually like showing up with purpose, knowing what that purpose is, and then showing up in that way? And if your answer is yes, I want you to know that that space is not a problem to fix. It's really a sort of call, an internal call, a God whisper, a gut feeling, whatever, however, the universe, however you want to describe that. It's it's a call to rise, to realign, to reclaim what matters to you. And you don't have to hustle your way out of it, but you do have to meet that space with clarity and some courage too. Because remember that fear I talked about, it is ever present. So for so many women. But remember, this moment is not about waiting, it's about you choosing. The version of you that's waiting on the other side of that threshold, she's hoping that you don't just get back to who you were. She's actually hoping that you stop apologizing for becoming someone new. She's hoping you stop shrinking into like this comfort and you start expanding into a more empowered version of yourself, the version of you that maybe feels really far away right now. But here's some truth. That version of you, she's closer than you think. She's in every intentional bite you take. She's in every time you move your body from a place of care rather than a place of punishment. She's in every moment when you show up for yourself, not because you have to, but because you want to, and you want to in a way that feels good. And so going back to this kind of what my friend called this sacred in between, it's not where you stop, it's where you start. So the question is, will you start? Thanks for being here with me. As always, I am filled with gratitude for it. I will see you right back here next time.